Assalamu alaikum. I welcome you to the General Anatomy lecture. Today we will discuss about general anatomy of nervous system. This is our last system. By the end of this system, our general anatomy lectures will be over. Let's start with it. Nervous system. First of all, we will discuss about its main functions. The most important function is the sensory input. It is the gathering of information to monitor changes occurring inside and outside the body, like uh, to perceive some changes in the external environment that is known as the stimulus. Then their integration. The integration is to process and interpret sensory input and decide if action is needed. If the action is needed, the motor output will be activated. That is a response to integrated stimuli. The response activates muscles or glands. These three functions are basically integrated functions of the nervous system. Then we come to the structural classification of the nervous system. It is composed of two systems. One is the central nervous system, other one is the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system includes brain and spinal cord, while peripheral nervous system includes nerves outside the brain and spinal cord. And nerves are of two types, major two types, sensory and motor. The motor or the efferent divisions are further classified as somatic, somatic, motor, or autonomic. The somatic deals with voluntary actions, and autonomic nervous system, it nerves, they are linked with involuntary actions. Here you can see this is a schematic diagram in which the interaction of CNS, the central nervous system, and the peripheral nervous system integration is clearly shown here, that we discussed previously in the functions of the nervous system. In this, you can see there is blue box which is showing sensory sensations, sensory organs that perceive the external stimuli, and they give the information to the central nervous system. And central nervous system, by way of brain and spinal cord, they interpret all the information, and they then in turn activate the effector organs or the motors or the muscles. This stimulation can be somatic, that is to activate skeletal muscles that are in voluntary control, or it can also stimulate the autonomic or the involuntary muscles that are sympathetic or parasympathetic. They affect the cardiac, smooth muscles, and the glands. This is the major classification of the nervous tissues. Firstly, we have neurons. Neurons has cell body. Here you can see a neuron typically has a cell body that can be unipolar, bipolar, and multipolar. Then nerve fibers that are modulated or non-modulated. These classification, cell body the classifications of the neurons, you might have studied in the histology, so we will not go in their details. Then we come to other supportive structures of the nervous system. That includes the neuroglia, ependymal cells, and neurosecretory cells. Then we come to the neurons. A typical neuron has this shape. It has a cell body. Then it has axon, and it has also dendrites on the terminal end of the axon. The cell body contains nucleus and is the metabolic center of the cell. The fibers include that I have already told you, axons and the dendrites. The dendrites conduct impulses towards the cell body, while axon conduct impulses away from the cell body. Axon end in axonal terminals. Axonal terminals contain vesicles with neurotransmitters, and axonal terminals are separated from next neuron by a gap. The synaptic cleft, a gap between the adjacent neuron. Synapses are basically the junctions where between the nerves, where the clinical application includes in multiple sclerosis, the myelin sheath is destroyed. If the myelin sheath is destroyed, the perception of the nerve becomes distorted, and they small stimulus can give much more enhanced reactions. The myelin sheath hardens to a tissue called basically this is the hardness of the myelin sheath, and the disease is known as sclerosis, and this is considered as autoimmune disease. Here are some figures of the neurons. Here you can see axonic neurons that do not contain any axon, typical axon. On the second, on the right side is the second type of neuron, that are the bipolar neurons. You can see they have got one side showing the dendrite and the other side showing the axon. Then on the more close next to bipolar neurons, there are pseudo-unipolar neurons. In this type of neuron, a single branch extends and it further divides into two branches that has got two axons, and on the end of the axons there are dendrites. Then we have multipolar neurons that has got cell body, and dendrites are directly attached to the cell body. On the other hand, there is axon. Then we come to the types of the receptors that are present within the body. Firstly, they are the exterior receptors. They basically affect skin, touch, light, pressure, pain, and temperature. The exterior receptors basically they perceive information from the stimulus that is outside the body, like uh, these are stimuli that are coming towards the body, and they are perceived by the skin, and that sensations are the touch, light, pressure, pain, and temperature. Then we have the telereceptors that detect changes from a distance, that include eyes. We can see distant objects with the help of eyes. We can hear with the help sound coming from far away with our ears, and we can smell variety of fragrances with our nose. So these all sensations that that can be perceived by the eyes, ear and nose, they come under the heading of telereceptors that perceive, detect changes from a distance. Then there are interoreceptors that detect changes from within the body, like digestion, excretion, circulation, and respiration. Then we have proprioceptors that receive information from deeper parts of the body, like joint capsules, ligaments, muscles, and fascia. Then we have some effectors. Effectors includes muscles and glands. These are further classified as somatic effectors and visceral effectors. The somatic effectors have endings that are myelinated. The cell bodies in the anterior gray horn and fiber go to the skeletal muscles. While in case of visceral effectors, the axons of the nerve endings are unmyelinated and are located in the ganglia of autonomic nervous system, and the fibers go to cardiac and smooth muscles plus glands as well. Then we come to the simplest, um, you can say, the simplest pathway of receptor and effector interaction, that is the reflex arc. The reflex is rapid, predictable, and involuntary responses to the stimuli. The reflex arc is direct route from sensory neuron to an interneuron and to the effector organ. Here you can see below there is skin, and that has got some neurons in it. They perceive the changes that are detected by the skin. The change was in the form of prick by a pin that you can see, that is perceived by this blue neuron, that is a sensory neuron, and it go to the spinal cord, and from there interneuron connects the sensory neuron to the motor neuron, and then this motor neuron, it affects the muscle, that is the effector organ. This is the smallest pathway. Then we come to the types of reflexes and their regulation. We have two types of reflexes, autonomic reflexes and we have the somatic reflexes. Autonomic reflexes include smooth muscle regulation, heart and blood pressure regulation, and regulation of the glands, digestive system regulation. Then we have somatic reflexes that includes activation of the skeletal muscles. This is another schematic diagram of subdivisions of the nervous system. You can see here, and there is a central nervous system that includes only brain and spinal cord. There is peripheral nervous system that has got two divisions, sensory and the motor division. Sensory division is divided into visual sensory division and somatic sensory division, and then motor division is further divided into visual motor division, that is further divided into sympathetic and parasympathetic, that constitutes the autonomic nervous system, and the motor division has another subdivision, that is the somatic motor division. The central nervous system develops from the embryonic neural tube, and it has got gray matter. The surface layer or the cortex of the cerebral hemispheres contains gray matter, and it has got deep placed nuclei. Then we have got the white matter that contains tracts that are known as bundles that can have lemnisci that are tracts, but they are basically ribbon like. Then we come to the peripheral nervous system. It allows brain and spinal cord to contact with the body and constitutes 12 cranial nerves and 31 spinal nerves. It has got ganglia that are sensory and motor ganglia of the autonomic nervous system. This is a schematic diagram of a typical spinal nerve. The spinal nerve consists of both motor and sensory axons. Here you can see the blue root or the dorsal root is the sensory root, and it has got sensory ganglia, or it is known as the dorsal root ganglion. And from the ventral side the motor root arises. Both roots unite to form a spinal nerve. In the spinal nerve, some of the fibers they decussate, and they further divide into dorsal and ventral rami. In the nervous system, we there are some further there are some connections that are arises from the spinal nerve. These are the connections of spinal nerves with the sympathetic trunk. These connections are known as the REMI communicans. We have two types of REMI communicans, gray and white. Gray REMI communicans, they exit at every level of the spinal cord. They carry postganglionic fibers from sympathetic ganglia to their destination, and also carry preganglionic fibers to the sympathetic ganglia, and they do not synapse, while white rami exit only at T1 to L2 level, and they carry only preganglionic fibers from the spinal cord to the paravertebral ganglia. Here you can see the gray ramus. It contains postganglionic fibers and also some preganglionic fibers, but they do not synapse in the ganglia. While the white rami, they contains preganglionic fibers. Then we come to the functional classification of the peripheral nerve fibers. Firstly, we have general somatic efferent. They they include motor supply of the skeletal muscles of body wall and limbs. Then we have general visceral efferent. They supply smooth muscles and glands. They are basically the autonomic nervous system fibers. Then we have general somatic efferents. They carry exterior receptors, basically exteroception from skin, proprioception from muscles, joints, ligaments, and tendons. Then we have general visceral efferent that perceive visoreception from viscera of the different viscera of the body. This is the picture of the brainstem, in which you can see here this is the Now we come to the functional classification of the cranial nerve fibers. All the four uh, uh, classes that we have discussed in the peripheral nerve fibers, that all are included. In addition to that four, and there are also three further types, that are the special somatic efferent that carry impulses from teleoreceptors uh, uh, like vision, hearing, smell and equilibrium. Then there are special visceral efferent that carry taste sensations. Then there is special visceral efferents. They are also called brachiomotor fibers. They carry motor impulses to skeletal muscles derived from brachial arches. Then we come to the dermatomes. Each spinal nerve except C1 supplies specific region of skin. We have got 30 dermatomes, and skin of face is supplied by trigeminal nerve. Muscles are innervated by a single ventral root that constitute a myotome. Here you can see different dermatomes. The cervical spinal nerves, they supply the region of head, neck and upper limb, its dorsal surface, while the thoracic nerves, they supply the skin of thorax, front and back, and ventral surface of the uh, arm and hand. Then the lumbar, they supply the ventral portion of the trunk and limbs, while sacral supply the back or back of the lower limbs. By this we come to the end of our lecture of nervous system. That was it was the first part of nervous system. The rest of the nervous system will be discussed in the next lecture. Thank you for your attention. Allah Hafiz.